Hello, my name is Miles, and I am your host of Stop Stigma, Start Healing, the raw and uncensored podcast where we talk openly and unapologetically about our lives as trans, lesbian, bi, gay, queer, and HIV positive humans. Our goal is to stop the stigma that prevents us from getting the health care we deserve. Each episode will feature real people in our community in conversation and storytelling. And here's the disclaimer. The experiences shared here are valuable and important. They are based on the lives of those in this space and some of you who are listening. Prepare to be educated, shocked, seen, triggered, and informed. No matter your response, keep the conversation going. So welcome back. This is season 2, episode 2, which we are calling Living with Conviction. This was sort of a continuation of an episode we did in the first season where some of you appeared on, and we had a lot of response from it, and I wanted to bring you all back. I think there's some important things for our folks in our community to hear. And so I would like to welcome our guests to the studio. And if we could just go around, do a brief introduction, and we'll talk a little bit more about the episode.
I'll start. My name is Zach, and I use he, him pronouns. 36 years old. Let's see what else. I was born and raised in Southeast Ohio. Graduate of Ohio University.
Not Wapakoneta.
Not Wapakoneta, God no. And let's see, I've been in Columbus since 2009. And excited to be here.
Thanks, Zach.
Hi, my name's Ray, she, her, born and raised in Buckeye City, Columbus, Ohio. I was released from incarceration in 2018. I graduated with my bachelor's in social work last year, and I just graduated with my master's in social work this month.
Yay!
Yes, she did.
So I'm just excited to be doing the work and in the spaces I want to be in.
Great.
My name is Kevin. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. I grew up in East Cleveland. Came to Columbus in 2019 when I got out. Did 26 years in prison, and I work at Hot Chicken Takeover, which I love. Mm-hmm. Been there since I got out. I learned about it while I was in there. And I said, I'm going there to work when I get out. And I've been there ever since.
They are not a sponsor of the show, but we would be glad to welcome them to be a sponsor of the show. They could bring us free food. No, they're great. They're a great company. They have a great practice. So welcome all three of you. So as I was preparing for today's podcast, Living with Conviction, and for those who are listening at home, this is specifically about people in the LGBTQ community who have lived experience with prison or jail. I've came across some probably not surprising details for you folks in the room, but I think important things for people who are listening to be aware of. So as LGBTQ folks, we are overrepresented in every part of the criminal justice system. I couldn't even begin to go through all of the data in terms of arrests, police stuff, court, prison, jail, like every aspect you can find. The data is we are more overrepresented than the general population. So no doubt there's some work and some research that probably ought to be done about the bias in all of the criminal justice system. We are incarcerated at 3 times the rate of the general population. We have a higher rate of community supervision. While incarcerated, we are subject to additional trauma just for being LGBTQ. No other reason other than just the bullying and the harassment and the victimization that occur in those settings. 6% of our community are sexually victimized by staff in correctional institutions, and 12% are sexually victimized by other inmates. There's very little to no treatment that is provided to folks with these experiences. And from my understanding, not a lot of competency around LGBTQ healthcare needs or issues in those spaces. So for me, this is why it's important for us to talk about this. I wish this were echoing through the halls of those institutions, but hopefully folks who have had those experiences are listening, and those who have the opportunity to change the system are also listening. And I brought these three in to talk more specifically about their stories, to hope for in hopes that people could hear them, connect with them, and maybe it's time for us to take some action. So I'm going to open it up to you three to share in whatever order. Share with us about your experience.
Well, I'll dive in. My experience. I appreciate centering the conversation, first of all, on data, because I think those numbers speak to, in general, if we talk about violence reduction, if we talk about reentry, if we talk about inclusivity, if we talk about equity, we really can't do any of that until we start healing all of the things done to us for our entire lives. And until we figure that out, I just think we're going to continue to be frustrated with this thing that we allegedly call justice. My justice involvement, I firmly believe, was a byproduct of years of untreated and unacknowledged trauma, addiction, neglect, identity issues. As I mentioned in the beginning, I was born on a 300-acre cattle farm, and it was a great place to learn some values, but certainly not a good place to realize that you were attracted to the same sex while being indoctrinated by very, very patriarchal religious systems. And so the idea of hiding something was just second nature to me. It had to be. There were crushes, there were slips, there were, the whole go to church camp thing and, all of that. But, in general, really could not express identity or figure out what identity even was until I went to OU. And so the entirety of my teenage years was some combination of sexuality, pornography, but then working like hell to hide it from the general public. So take that as the formative development of one's identity, add in two parents who are both addicts, who both pass away before I even graduate college, and then put this over obsessive perfectionistic mentality on top of it, along with workaholism, and you get Zach at 23 years old when I moved to Columbus. None of that was treated. None of that was acknowledged, because my priority was get a job, be successful, cover up all of the junk, and keep moving forward. That worked for a couple years, but eventually it caught up with me. And I found myself defending myself against choices that I had made, crimes that I had committed, relating to my career as a high school educator, where, again, the kind of sexuality coming out sideways, working like hell to cover it, found itself again happening, this time through people that I was around that were close-ish to my age. Unfortunately, they were not 18, they were 17. Because I believe, partly because of politics, also because this was a same-sex case, and had a new judge, I did not stand a chance at doing anything but going to prison. But I am still grateful that I had the 2 years that I did defending myself and fighting the case, because that's when my work began. And for me, that 2 years of work on myself and getting real about risk factors, addiction, trauma, mental health, diagnoses and symptoms, holistic care, gratitude, things that are still important to me today. Had I not had those 2 years to get those instilled in me, I think my prison experience would have been very different. I served 3 years, and I spent the entirety of my time at a, low to medium security institution, very large institution, fairly visible LGBT representation in the population. I learned very quickly that prison is a society in of its own, and I'm sure my colleagues here on the panel will chuckle too at that. But it really is a unique society in and of itself. And one of the things that I discovered very quickly was there are certain things that do and do not happen because you are outwardly LGBT when you're incarcerated. One of those is very few people will eat or drink after you, which was just wild to me. The other one is that if you are a gay male, it is assumed, one, that you are a woman, and two, that you're a bottom. And I was damn sure neither one of those. And so it became immediately this clash of the standard with what I was just not willing to succumb to. It never was something that became a threat to me, but it was instead an opportunity to explain to folks the difference between sexual orientation and gender identity, the difference between, effeminate type mannerisms or the way I sit versus sexual preferences. And so when I think back on my time incarcerated, those were some of the things that I was the most grateful for. And I met some incredible human beings who were paying for the worst decision they made in their entire lives, as I was. And so there was a lot of meaning I was able to find in there. I was also able to see a lot of horrible homophobic actions. Almost on a daily basis, I was probably called a fag by a corrections officer, and I knew that they could get away with it because if I wrote them up, they would retaliate. And when they retaliate, you go to the hole. When you go to the hole, you get security points. And when you get security points, this fragile little thing that you know as your parent institution could be changed. And I just wasn't willing to risk it. So I left after 3 years, knowing it would be difficult because of the nature of my conviction, not having a clue exactly how difficult it would be. And I have been home 5 years now. And my reentry process has been.
Let's come back to that. How about that?
Yeah. He says, Zach, we're moving on.
Let's hold some and keep the listeners listening.
I like it.
Yeah. We'll talk about reentry in a minute.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Zach.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So when we talk about the LGBTQ population in regard to incarceration, I think that the male and female institutions are vastly different in the society and how the inmates are treated and just how everything functions. And I apologize for saying inmates, but the people who are incarcerated. So my experience, I came out when I was 16. I was sexually assaulted at 18. Drug addiction began, got incarcerated. Boom. So when I was in prison, it is literally like this lesbian wonderland. Okay. Everybody's gay. It's the cool thing to do, which to an extent is somewhat insulting. I mean, I understand the need for others a lot of individuals feel they need someone else to validate themselves. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from. We're just yearning for love. We're yearning for comfort in this land of depravity. And we find that with one another. Like, it is more socially acceptable for women to be gay. It is more just not as targeted or as much as an issue. Women aren't as much of a threat, I guess. But in my incarceration experience, everyone has a girlfriend, even if they could be just best friends, never have had a sexual, intimate experience in their lives, but they're gay, they're together, and it's, in a sense, it's insulting. In a sense, it is encouraging because it is so acceptable and becomes normal, and you take that out into everyday life, and does breed more acceptance and understanding. So it's a double-edged sword. But I know for me personally, I remember vividly having this just identity crisis mental breakdown because it's based on this idea of the heteronormative relationship where there's a stud and a femme, and there's the masculine female, and then there's the feminine female. And I didn't fit either of those categories. I'm a tomboy, I'm me, I have feminine qualities. And at the time I had more masculine qualities. So the studs, were comfortable with me being around their girlfriends, and their femmes were comfortable with me being around their girlfriends. And it was this weird place for me to be in because I wasn't boy enough or I wasn't a girl enough. Like, I was just in this weird place. And I remember having a breakdown My bunkie is trans. He was trans. He's still trans. So all the girls were all over him because he was the closest thing to a male they could get. And all the girls that I liked wanted to be with him because he was the boy. And so it was, when I think about, just identity and incarceration, it's still very much based on the heterosexual relationship. And it almost seemed like the guards kind of understood. They come out in the real world. So they know there's tomboyish girls, or they understand that middle ground. But in the incarceration setting, you got the boys and the girls. So there's not much room for that in between, genuine, just who you are. So I think about that a lot in the whole prison society context. And then also we mentioned PREA, or the statistics of sexual assault. If someone just lost someone, the policies state we're not allowed any physical contact. So we could get in trouble for giving someone a hug. It is absolutely ludicrous. What I've seen, need for touch is a human need, and we are being deprived that. So it's a very strange just way. I understand the need for PREA and for protection for sexual assault, but it's being taken out of context and it's being used to punish us further, oftentimes, instead of actually protecting us, which is really frustrating.
Oh, okay.
There's my trauma dump.
Thank you. Okay. Kevin, you're up.
So, like I said, I'm Kevin. I did 26 years in there, and I agree on most of the things that you all said. In there, you either, all the men think you film, they all think you're a bottom, and which I was neither. I was, neither one. But while I was in there, I was able to start a program to try to help stop that stigma. It was called an Educate program, and I did it for 5 years while I was in there with a unit manager that was in there, because the word fag went around a lot, So she made it where if anybody said that word, you go to the hole. It was really, really good. I was only in Marion. I hear it might be going to different institutions now, I hope. But after I left, it stopped. I was really, really pushing it. I would go to different blocks and talk to different straight guys. And I say straight guys like that because most of them wasn't. As you got the kinds that'll say, psst, come over here, come, let's go in the back in the dark and let's not tell anybody, but they not gay. I'm not gay. I'm just doing this gay for the stay, I guess is what they call it, but so we started that program, me and her, and we did it a lot, and got people. It wasn't just for people to understand homosexuality or anything like that. It was for people to understand people. Everybody's different, Black, white, Chinese, African, whatever. We talked about different religions and different cultures. I learned a whole lot myself, studying and looking up different things for different cultures. So a lot of guys appreciate it, and we did that a lot. But in there, I did a TED Talk in there, and it talked about, when I go to the child hall, you sit at a table and you clear the whole table. Everybody get up. Everybody. Being gay is contagious or something. Gonna rub off on you. And it's not. And people is just like that. It's like they don't, they came from out here and went in there, and all of a sudden you find a gay person, but we're everywhere all over the world, and I'm sure they had met some while they was out here, but it's just a big stigma in there on being gay. It is, and again, like you said, everybody think, oh, you a woman, you a bottom, and that's not always that. It was really hard in there, if you wanted to move like I was in a cell most of the time I was in there. 7 different prisons, you know. So I was mostly in a cell. If it's somebody that knew I could cell with, they wouldn't let that happen, you know, because they think we're gonna have sex. But it's not always that. You know, it's just somebody you can get along with. You can, you know, jail with and be able to live comfortable, you know. But that didn't always happen. You know, it was really a whole lot of no, you can't, and it was always because you're gay, you know. And you know, I fought one time, just moved to a block, and the unit manager said, "Well, you can't move in that block because there's too many gay people in there already." I'm like, "Oh, you can't say that." You know, that's a violation of my civil rights. I still got them. You know, so it went all the way to the warden until they came down and they said, "Well, move him in that block tomorrow." You know, but it was, you know, I'm like, why? It's just another block. I'm still locked up, you know, and I'm still going to be, you know, but I could tell you that unit manager is the one that helped me start that program. She did, you know, and she said, you know, you got me in trouble a long time ago. She did. But we became the best friends. I still talk to her now sometime. I call her and she, you know, we talk about what you're doing and all that, make sure I'm okay. She helped me a lot when I got out, you know, but it's pretty bad in there, you know, for a homosexual, for a gay person, for, you know, however you want to call it, you know, and that's also with staff, you know, because as soon as they see you, they think, oh, you're going off to do something, you know, and it's not always like that. I was lucky to have got a rapport with the staff, even the ward and all that. And I was able to do mostly what I wanted to do because they knew I wasn't doing anything, you know, because I just wanted to come home. That was all. Just want to go home. I wasn't getting tickets. You know, I just want to go home. I ended up working in the ODR there, cooking their food, you know. And that was shocking. It took a minute, but they let me. And it was good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's talk about reentry. This is, I think, a challenge, really that's universal, but I think unique challenges for folks in our community. If you could share some about that experience, what that's probably been like and probably continues to be like. It's probably not a process that ends easily.
I could say a few things about that.
Sure.
Well, I got out in 2019. I'm not from Columbus. I'm originally from Cleveland, but they sent me to Columbus. Why, I don't know. But I'm grateful because I like Columbus.
So you don't have a choice. They just say that you're going there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I asked to go to Cleveland, so I guess I didn't have a choice. So they sent me here. I was at the Y downtown. And, you know, while I was out, I had a roommate while I was out. Not a roommate. Yeah. Roommate while I was out, and he had stole my identity. He had used my identity for like 5 years while I was in there. And it's crazy when you go in there, anybody that got your social security number, your birth, your birth date, and your name, they can use it. And he did. You know, he caught cases. Well, and I didn't find out about it until I went to get my driver's license. And they said, well, you got a warrant for your arrest. I'm like, for what? You know, and this had happened just, I got out in that January. It happened in November. He caught these cases in Cleveland. You know, so I called them and I told them, I said, hey, it wasn't me and I could prove it. You know, my parole officer, all this. They said, well, you got to come to Cleveland. I said, you don't understand. I just got out. I did 26 years. I don't have a job. I don't have money. I can't just come up to Cleveland. You know, I just can't do it. Luckily, I had a friend up there that let me come up there. And luckily, I went down to Stonewall here in Columbus. I was just walking by. They had some lawyers in there. And I told them about the situation of him stealing my identity, you know. And they took my case pro bono. They did. They took my case. They cleared it all up, you know. At least I thought they did. I mean, they did. I don't know. I thought they did. So, like, not too long ago, I was at a laundromat and these police just pulled up, you know, all 3 cars, guns out, and they said, oh, you know, they wanted to arrest me, give me my ID and all that. And they said, well, you got a warrant for your arrest in Cleveland. I said, no, that's not me. This is what happened. And, you know, and I'm going to tell you, it ended up, the lawyers had cleared it up. But then the police told me that it was a warrant from the year after I got out, which was not true. I had got a lawyer to check on it, and she never did find a warrant for my arrest. But they took me downtown and fingerprint me and everything, and they said, well, if the BCI fingerprints don't match, we'll let you go, which they did, you know, but that was terror. I was terrified. I was, you know, and nothing ever happened of it. You know, I put in a complaint to the Columbus Police Department and nothing happened. You know, that was hard. It really was. You know, but getting out, just finding a place to live, people don't want to rent to you, you know. Well, as far as me, I guess it was because of my case I had. And then getting a job was very hard. And that was another reason why I'm at Hot Chicken, because they didn't care. You know, they don't care about your past. They just care about your future. And I've been doing that. And they've been really, really good, you know, but getting out was it was very, very hard. I can say that. It was hard to just walk down the street, you know, because it was like a whole nother world, you know, like I was on Mars somewhere and I just came back to Earth, you know. You know,
and the world had changed probably quite a bit in 20-some years.
Oh, yeah. Telephone. Yeah. My nephew took me to Walmart, gave me a phone and said, here. And I said, okay, where's the directions? Yeah. He said, it's not any, just push buttons. I was up till 5 o'clock in the morning pushing buttons.
Figure out.
Yeah, but I figured it out and I'm still figuring stuff out, you know, because it's still hard, you know. Yeah. And I'm doing it by myself. Yeah. You know, I've been doing pretty good.
Zach, Ray, how about you?
Well, I almost ended up in a very similar predicament where I didn't have a say over where I was going to go because when I was doing my reentry planning, I didn't realize that because my offense had involved a cell phone, it involved like wireless things, whatever, that in the infinite wisdom of the supervising authority, they said you should not live where there's internet in the modern age.
Speaking of Mars, maybe
correct.
Mars was an option.
I think that would have been their preference for me. But so it ended up that a close friend's grandparents both had passed away while I was incarcerated, and the home sat empty with no Wi-Fi. So immediately reentry was tougher than it needed to be, in my opinion. And I think tougher than what the data reflects it needs to be. And I always go back, not because poor pitiful Zach, but because if we look at the data, like it doesn't need to be this hard. So, you know, got out, I had only served 3 years, so still have my clothing and my belongings. But I had changed, if only because I had been forced to adapt to a really difficult time. And I don't think I was fully prepared for the mental and emotional task ahead of me for that adjustment. A lot of conditioned responses I didn't even know I had, feeling like I needed to stand up and be counted in the afternoon when I would have normally done that. For a long time, feeling like I should have something clipped to my collar where my ID would have been. Overwhelmed very easily with a lot of choices, with new textures and smells and tastes. And I had adapted to food that was just barely nutritional. And so when I actually had access to rich foods, like my body had to readjust. So looking back on that now 5 years later, I'm grateful for those really difficult experiences that I went through because it allows me to be a greater, hopefully, asset to someone else going through them. Which is really what I've tried to fill my reentry with. But because of the nature of my conviction, there really is a special place in hell for folks that, you know, reenter or just are convicted in general. We're supervised differently. We are stigmatized more intensely. Certainly within the LGBT community, it is not a badge of honor to be a registered sex offender. Yeah, I'll come back to that one. But throughout all of that, what I've been fortunate enough to realize is that, again, had it not been for those 2 years of really good self-care before I was ever sentenced, I would not have had the resilience coming home in reentry to deal with the extra high hoops I was having to jump through. And so because of great support, because of hard work on myself, I was able to then utilize support and find a job with a close friend. I was able to get involved and volunteer and use my lived experience to help other folks, and keep doing work on myself, more importantly.
Thanks.
When we think about reentry, it's hard. It's a hard issue for anybody. And I was very fortunate that I still had my family and I still had my family's support. So I did have a home to go home to. I did have someone to help me with those basic needs that, you know, a lot of people do not. So I had an advantage to that point. But what is not addressed other than the basic needs is just the mental effects of incarceration on you. I served 3 years, which compared to a lot of individuals ain't shit. But I had a panic attack leaving prison. I was literally on the bathroom floor, dry heaving, crying in the release center when I was about to be released. And that same night when I was on my mother's couch, just filled with this intense loneliness and this sense that I was so lost because everything I knew, a lot of individuals that I loved were still behind those walls and I was separated from them. So just the mental aspect of reentry alone, not even including finding a place to live, finding something to eat, finding a way to make a living, which you need to function in the society and go through the motions. But the mental aspect of having your community ripped from you and having to find one and create one on your own is not addressed. There's not enough support and reentry in that aspect. We don't have a brick and mortar reentry place that holds community meetings that often you do have some efforts here and there, but there's not enough funding for things like that. And the little bit of funding we do get goes hopefully to help with housing and basic needs in reentry. But the mental health aspect is under-addressed and under-recognized. So that's a huge part of reentry that I hope to be able to help out in and focus on.
So if you could share with us about how the LGBTQ community responds to you now post your experience. You touched on it, Zach.
Yeah, I touched on it. Yeah. So when I was still litigating my case, because it was fairly public, because I was a school teacher and it was that whole narrative, a Catholic school teacher at that. And so now I'm also somehow a priest, whatever. But that's what the news alleged it said. So, but because it was fairly high profile, there was a fair amount of both, passive and active harassment by the community. Not so unlike I dealt with by officers and even, some residents of the correctional system when I was in. I think it made it sting a little bit more that it was from the LGBT community. You expect ignorance in general if you've never been on that side of the justice system, but you hope that perhaps someone would pause and say, but we are already, as a collective, already so disenfranchised. Let's at least try. Some did, a lot did not. As recently as last year, standing at a drag show for Pride, I opened my phone and had a message on Grindr from someone saying some pretty awful things, with literally no information in their profile. And it made me wonder, did they make another profile just to say something horrible to me and then block me? Clearly they knew who I was and what had happened. Then I'd been home 4 years at that point. So I think some of it too is when you have to come face to face with someone that may potentially reflect back to the person choices they may have made, or paranoias that they have from their past, or resentment they have from things that happen to or around them. I think that's sometimes where our community could do better to pause and think about, how am I allowing my perception, experience, or trauma to now be thrown at this person simply because something about them I don't agree with? And I don't agree with what I did either, but it's done. And so it would be nice to feel like I could go in most establishments, or at least not be harassed on a dating app during Pride of all times. It has gotten better, if only because of my own resilience. And I have a really incredible group of, LGBT and straight allies who are incredibly supportive and provide a buffer. But there is still work to be done, particularly around more taboo type crimes when they happen in minority communities.
Sure.
Yeah, I think most of my experience with the LGBTQ plus community out here is with those who were formerly incarcerated still. And there's kind of like this understanding that because you see people who get out who were the studs in prison and now they're a whole female, which is, to each his own. But there's just kind of this understanding, like I didn't just pretend for my sexuality during incarceration to get me through. There's just kind of a understanding, like we're just us regardless. Like I'm gonna be gay in prison. I'm gonna be gay not outside of prison. So I think honestly that's the most experience I've had with the community outside. I haven't. Well, I do work in a restaurant, so I'm very grateful, and I just have been very fortunate. My friends that I work with at the restaurant that are in the community, I allow them to get to know me for me before I divulge my background. So once that happens, I don't see a difference in treatment, how they treat me, because they got to know me first before the fact that I'm formerly incarcerated. But if, there were whispers and people like, she was a drug addict and she got incarcerated, I don't know if they would approach me, I would hope so. And I'm sure things have been said, around too, because a lot of those people went through that with me in my addiction. But for the most part, when I talk about my work friends who are part of the community, they have been very supportive, and I am very grateful for that. I'm actually going to a birthday party next week for my friend's boyfriend, so I'm excited.
Hey,
yeah,
that's exciting. Kevin, how about you?
In the LGBT community, I met one person when I got out who he took me in. He invited me for, not took me in living with him, but just, he embraced me, and he invited me over for Easter, which was really, really nice. But I don't really do much because, I am still on parole and I try to stay out of the way. I had met someone, and that's a whole nother ball game. I don't want to talk about that. But as far as the LGBT community, I don't, like when I go out somewhere or something, I don't really know anybody, so don't nobody really say nothing to me. Every now and then they may talk, but for the most part, I have a very, very close friend in Cleveland who I go see, so I go up there and, me and him around the same age, and we might go out for a drink or something, or go out somewhere, but I work a lot.
Yeah.
I do, because I'm playing catch up.
Yeah.
I always say that. It was 26 years, and I'm playing catch up, and I'm getting old. I'm 60. Yeah, I'll be 61 in July. So, I got to save up for when I get real old. Yeah. I don't really have too much dealing with the LGBT community unless I just go out somewhere, which I don't.
Are there, you mentioned being on parole, were there or are there restrictions in terms of where you can go upon reentry initially? And
I mean, a lot of it, well, allegedly, a lot of it depends on your offense.
the offense?
Yeah. So if you have an offense that has some relation to drugs and alcohol and you have a no drugs and alcohol condition, you're probably not going to get cleared to go to someone's kegger for St. Patrick's Day.
Sure.
Because the nature of my conviction, I was not allowed to be places where there were teenagers, for example. Right. But that also included, like, if I wanted to check out a library book, I could only use the pickup window. I couldn't actually go in the library.
Wow.
So now we're towing the line of, like, is this really doing what it's intended to do?
Yeah.
And then of course, leaving the state when you're on parole, you have to get special clearance from.
Oh yeah.
But if people come home and they're not on parole, you can do whatever you want within reason and within the law. So it really depends on each person's case.
As far as that, like going out of state or something, I got a good parole officer, and like I say, I stay out the way. I just go to work and go home. Last year I was able to go to New York. It was great to help open a hot chicken, which was great, and they let me go. But I really can't like just move when I want to, move to another place or something. Got to report it. And, just like if I just go to Cleveland, most of my family in Cleveland, I gotta let them know. And it's 2 hours away, but I gotta let them know I'm going to Cleveland. But I guess it's a whole lot of rules as far as when you get out, when you're on parole, and I didn't have too many things that I couldn't do, except for like that, going out of town or just going to Cleveland or moving somewhere. Other besides that, I didn't have any restrictions.
What about connecting with other people? I've heard some folks say that there's restrictions in terms of who you're allowed to have contact with.
Do you know the specifics on that?
Well, it depends on the offense. And it changes.
Because last I heard, felons aren't allowed to be around other felons.
That's
True. That's true.
That's what I've heard.
So where do I get all my friends? Because all my friends are felons.
Or how do you go to group counseling or a 12-step meeting?
People and get support.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it depends on the officer, and it depends on their perception of your risk factors. Now that would make sense, but I mean, I've had a parole officer in my first 6 months home go through my phone who happened, and there was someone in there who happened to have the exact same name as someone I was incarcerated with, who was also on her caseload.
Yeah.
And she said, "How do you know him?" And I said, "We dated 6 years ago." "Well, you shouldn't know him." And I said, "I think you might have the wrong person."
Yeah.
And she was like ready to violate me just for having this person's number in my phone.
Yeah.
Because he was also the same type of offense. He was also around my age. He was also in the LGBT community. So of course we'd cook up some action. But a lot of those types of things are very subjective, which is why the last line of any parole or supervision agreement is anything else my officer tells me.
So they can go through your cell phone.
They can do whatever they want.
You lose your
underwear
right.
drawer.
Yeah, you lose your right to search and seizure. Yeah.
Voting?
Depends on what state you're in. We're not allowed to vote during our incarceration, but in Ohio, once we are released, we're allowed to vote. I know a lot of the southern states like Georgia and Alabama, felons cannot vote. But hopefully that's something we're advocating for and working on. But in Ohio, actually, felons are allowed to vote. I would just like to make that clear, because even though we're allowed, no one knows that. I ask all my friends, and they're like, "We're not allowed to vote. I have a felony." And we're also allowed to file to get our gun rights back. But nobody knows about this. There's so many things we can, not so many. There's the opportunities we can have, but because in the past we did not have those.
The stories
there's
are
not
told,
the education to allow us to know our rights.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
No, I was just gonna say, as far as you say, fellas not supposed to be around fellas, which I thought was crazy because, like I say, it's hard to find a place to stay.
Right.
So you find somebody that probably been incarcerated, that you know from in there, that you can trust and everything. Y'all can't live together, I be like, we can't live together, but we lived together for years in there, and it was okay, But we both out here. We trying to, build our life back up and help each other. Let us do that, but they don't. You can't, and that don't make sense to me.
Well, let's take a short break, and we'll be back in a few moments.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Finding community as an LGBTQ person is challenging enough. Having the lived experience of being in prison or jail makes connecting and finding your way even more difficult. So let's talk. Living with Conviction, a support group held on the first Tuesday of every month. Check out equitashealth.com for more information. Welcome back to the final few moments of Living with Conviction. And so we were talking about some of the restrictions or some of the alleged restrictions that have been lifted or vary depending on your sentence or your reporting officer. It sounds like there's a lot of variability in what you can and cannot do. But what are some of the connections that have been really helpful for you in your reentry that folks ought to know about? Your own experience and things you know about that are in the community.
So mine, like I said, it's my job. Hot Chicken really embrace the LGBT community.
You're wearing the colors right now.
Oh yeah. So we was in the parade when I first got out, and it was awesome. I was walking down in the middle of the high street and yelling and everything. And the owner was like, "You having a ball?" I said, "I absolutely am."
Can you actually, because I think it's probably good for people to know, not necessarily for that business, but I think it's a business that has really a good practice, and share a little bit about some of the supportive things they do.
So they will hire practically anybody, if you was incarcerated. They don't care about your past. They care about your future. They're there to help you build up, anything like if you have addictions, if you feel like you're slipping back, if you talk to the manager that's there, they will help you get some resources, and help you out. They just help out a lot, as far as scheduling. They'll work around your schedule if you got to go to programming or anything, I've been doing really good since I've been there. I became an assistant general manager since I've been there.
Okay.
And yeah, almost 5 years. And that was tough. I ain't gonna say it. Because in every job that you have, there's somebody, there's that one or two people who don't like you because you're but I got over that hump too, because I feel like you're just jealous. I'm gonna just keep being me, and I don't like to let people pull me down or take me out my square. When I'm at work, I'm happy. I try to make everybody happy, because I think if you're at the job that you work at, if you're not happy, you're miserable and you don't want to go to work, but it's really a good company, and they embrace the LGBT community. They did. As far as Kaleidoscope here in Columbus, they was helping then. It changed a lot because he sold it. Now it's at like big corporation, and hopefully they'll embrace the LGBT community also. I talk to the owner sometimes, so I've been trying to tell him, say, "Hey, let's go to the Pride parade this year, or get Pride shirts," because they did it every year. They had Pride shirts from Hot Chicken, and everybody, they all love it. It's really fun. It's a good job.
What are some of the other things?
Yeah. Well, I've worked in restaurants my entire life too, and I've been fortunate. I feel like there's the I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's like a insurance, or when a restaurant hires you, they get taxes off for hiring
like
people,
a tax incentive,
to hire people who are incarcerated, and then also they have some sort of a surety but it's where like if something were to happen and money was to go missing or something because of the felon, then they would be reimbursed. So
Is that a state funded program? Do you know any?
Federal.
Federal?
Yeah, federal bonding. Mm-hmm.
So it's the myth that nobody wants to hire you because you're a felony. I think it's come a long way.
Mm-hmm.
I remember back in 2008 era, I wanted to be a management position at Sonic, but because of my record, I could not get that. Yeah. And I know that we have things like the qualification for employment, which is kind of a loophole to allow you to get those positions that normally policies would not allow you. We're working on the qualification for housing going on right now. So I think that we have made a lot of progress, especially in just the past 10 years. The unemployment rates with the pandemic and not having a lot of individuals working have been great for second chance individuals and second chance employers. A lot more people are willing to hire. A law was passed in Ohio where we're able to get our license now. I got my license in social work, which is a generally accepting career, but it just makes it easier. Mm-hmm. I believe OSU is working on banning the box, or they did ban the box.
What's that mean, ban the box?
Will you check, are you a felon?
Oh. Like on employment applications? Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so there's a lot of progress that's being made, which is phenomenal. But it's just a step in the right direction. There's still a lot that needs to be done. I mean, once you have a criminal record, you're doing some form of life. Mm-hmm. You know, whether it's unable to get a house, unable to get a job, unable to see or speak to certain individuals, there's always going to be barriers. So until we can do our time for the crime and then become just like everyone else, there's going to be work to be done.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that just made me think. I just discovered yesterday that I can't take out a small business administration loan if I wanted to, because they have this thing where you have to pass a character interview to get a Section 4A small business administration loan. And because of my status on the registry, I would not pass, no matter how good my character is or not. That one incident, my character has been decided for me. Yeah. For me, the connections that were really important were kind of like what already has been mentioned, these wraparound support agencies that, my needs were pretty specific when I came home. It was more behavioral and like adjustment type things. So meeting other folks with criminal convictions was really important because I saw them being successful, cutting their grass, doing all the things citizens do. So initially that was really important for me. Then I started realizing some of these carve out and exclusions. And then I got mad. And then I said, you know what? I wanted to be a teacher my entire life. Maybe this is what I need to work on educating people on. And so then going from being served by agencies to now working with and for agencies, several of which I still work with currently, was incredible. And it allowed me to harness what I felt like was a voice that was kind of just like bottled up, wanting to shout something, now able to, formally do that. And so for me, that's been really, really important. And then just, 2 months ago now, was able to start as a kind of a national policy place where a lot of this stuff stems from, including things like SBA loans and things like, different rights that we lose essentially. There was just a report that came out today from CBS News that in the first year of reentry, 40% of people are employed for the entire first year. And that's not because the programs don't exist. They're not funded enough, but it's not because they don't exist. It's because of all of the other elements of economic mobility that we don't talk about, including but not limited to access to a lot of the basics that are incredibly important in reentry. The fact of the matter is that one of two housing programs here in the city of Columbus, I would not be able to be served by, though I would qualify for, because of the conviction type that I have. And in my home community, that is just not acceptable. And yet that is the reality. So for me, what was significant was individuals who were willing to look at me for a human and not illegal choices that I made. Continue to work on myself through culturally competent, trauma-informed providers and agencies like Equitas and the care I received there.
Plug.
See, you got it.
I didn't ask him to say that.
Yeah, well, but then also finding different outlets, to express, passion that I have for full citizenry back at some point in my life. That would be cool. But it's been a really incredible 5 years journey.
So final words, what would, if someone out there is listening, they just stepped out, they're trying to reestablish, what sort of words of hope would you like to share to them?
Get connected. I mean, especially here in Central Ohio, there are a lot of organizations, whether it be reentry or for the LGBTQIA plus community, that exist. I think to some extent we are all involved in at least one of them. And there are a lot of resources out there. It just takes some time looking for that. There are people out there willing to help, including all of us. And I would just say network and get to know people and get to create those opportunities. I'm here today because I reached out and I followed a lead and I met a person who met a person, and now I know Zach, and now I know Miles, and now I know Kevin, So just taking those risks and meeting those people and going after your needs and dreams. Anything is possible if you put the work in. And it's my hope that one day we will accomplish what we're setting out to do. I mean, there's a lot of progress that's being made. I don't want it to sound like there's not progress. There certainly is. There's just so much more work to do, but I'm fortunate to be able to have a role in playing that work. So I would love to help anybody who's interested. Yeah.
Thanks. Kevin, how about you?
That sounds good to me. I think just networking, like she said, I went through Stonewall and they helped me get my identity back, which was great, and for people who's just getting out, just keep pushing, it's always a storm, but the sun always shine again, and you just got to think like that and feel like that. Cause it was many times when I got out, I was on my knees in tears, because I didn't know what to do, but keep it up, keep pushing, and just network, reach out to people if you need help. Don't do like I did and don't say nothing. Yeah.
You want to take us home, Zach?
Oh boy.
Can you top those?
I don't know about all that. A couple things come to mind. What I was told in like my second year of reentry, which you've got to keep your own oxygen mask on first. Especially for folks that want to get involved in sharing their story to help others, volunteer, direct service. It is easy to give to the point of not having anything left for yourself. And I had to learn that the hard way a couple times. And when you deplete yourself, don't underestimate the ability of some of those past urges and addictions and things to rear their ugly head if that self-care is not there, because a prison sentence will certainly just not take those away. So I think being real with oneself is really important. Continuing to explore identity, because, putting the label of having justice involvement on top of other minority status is stacking potentially traumas. And I think we have to be really, really intent at looking at that. Post-incarceration syndrome is a real thing. You add that into other types of addictions and disorders and diagnoses. And I feel like it's as important that folks seek out the unique type of help that matches the uniqueness of their story and their need. And then as has been said, and I will echo, got to connect. We belong to each other in some way, shape, or form. And I think that finding that belonging, while maybe not having all the rights back that, in my opinion, we are entitled to yet, even just that sense of belonging and acceptance can go a long way to making someone feel like they're home.
Great. Thank you very much, the three of you, for sharing your experiences, allowing people out there listening to learn a little bit more about this, hopefully resonate with your story. For those out there that are listening that have not had this experience in their life, connect with folks in our community, reach out, get involved. They need our support and help to change the system. As you've heard today, it's getting out is a huge challenge. There's lots of barriers that are in the way of people being successful, and we are stronger together. So connect, keep listening, stop stigma, and start healing. Thank you.
Yeah.